Button. Good evening. Thank you, Bingley Noise from Shenzhen I, and welcome back to Shenzhen I, where, having been on holiday for a week, I wonder if I can do that in character as well. I come back to work and have no idea what the company's doing. It probably pivoted to something entirely new while I was away. So let's see what's in my email. Thank you. So we have the automatic colour changing running shoes, which magically change their colour to match your outfit. Well, kind of. Or rather, to harmonise with your outfit. You don't want them to precisely match. And the automatic cocktail mixer for airlines.
What design compromise is forced by it being for airlines?
You only have 6 ingredients,
Right.
primarily. Oh, and I've totally not started up my spare laptop, so I will be occasionally forgetting that IRC exists. Right. So, yes, we also have a few older things, in particular the dubious military things, the dubious thorium mining thing, the prototype of game, which I still haven't got round to, and the slightly dubious cryptocurrency deposit terminal. So, if anyone has an opinion, they could yell, otherwise I will pick something. Yes, I believe the cocktail mixer is indeed for the airline, for the staff to use. I mean, to be fair, his suggestion of what the flight attendants could throw together is more or less what the his magic cocktail mixer will be able to do. So, it's not like it's going to be very helpful.
I think Claire half voted for the running shoes.
Yes, okay.
Wow, so she voted twice for half voted for the running shoes. She voted for the running shoes.
Let us look at those, because I think they'll be the interesting one anyway. So, this will require reference to the documentation. So let us open up the documentation for my eyes, but not yours. There we are. Right. So essentially, we get in a bunch of a number from the sensor, and we generate 2 numbers that are the output, which are one of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, possibly 6 colours. So the tricky thing is that we are meant to construct essentially a histogram of the colours we receive, so that we can pick whichever one is the most, whichever is the modal colour, which is slightly tricksy. So
this is actually quite like what I ended up having to do in the underground to match up the piece colours to the players' preferences.
So here so looking at this, we could have to. So we might have like 10 inputs that we need to find which bucket is the modal one. Happily, the buckets are mostly sensible widths, in that all of the buckets bar one are precisely 10 units wide, starting from say 40 to 49. The only oddity is the lowest one runs from 20 to 39.
What those things called Cool Dad?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, Cool Dad is in this universe a some kind of musical star. We have encountered him occasionally.
Okay.
Right, so I need to find my bit of foam that stops my legs overheating when I have this program running. There we are, right. Oops. So, so that means we're going probably to want to keep this histogram somewhere, which probably means we need a small amount of RAM. We only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 slots we need, so the small RAM will be fine, which is good because it's the only one we've got available. So let's just drop some RAM in there. So it has one simple input and 2 simple outputs, which is a minor nuisance, but that says to me we need 2 processors, one of which handles sampling the input and the other of which handles generating the output. That sounds good. The output one can probably be quite cheap, because all it needs to do is essentially... we're not charged for copper anyway. Indeed, if you're designing printed circuit boards, you generally want as much of it covered in copper as possible so that you don't waste valuable etchant etching away all of the copper. And then we feed an X-bus input to that, and we have it generate one of the colours. How many colours are there anyway? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Which means we need 12 numbers. Maybe we need a ROM that reads from. In order to... Well, we'll worry about that in a bit. And then we'll have another processor that's probably a more complicated one that listens to sensor and button and wibbles around with the RAM in order to construct the histogram. Possibly even the 2 of them just talk to the RAM. So the second one, this one constructs the histogram and then says, right, go and do it. I wonder if that would work. So what does this have to do then? It goes... right, so... So in the simple case, it just sits while the button's not pressed. It just sits there. Okay, that's not good enough even to pass the test for the first 2 cycles because we're meant to make sure that we write 50 to both of the outputs. Well, let's do that. This is almost certainly not the code we're going to end up with, but... Right, now we pass the tests for the first 2 steps. Indeed, we passed the tests for quite a long time. Until we actually have to change the colours, at which point it turns out that we haven't written the code for that. Right. So, then, if the button is pressed... Actually, we probably want this to be 2 separate loops, don't we? We want this to be like... actually to go plus jump into the other loop, probably. because we have to do something when the button's released. Yes, okay, we might go do the thorium mining later. Right. Not sure if this is actually efficient because we seem to be spending a lot of time on our jumps here. Anyway, so if the button is pressed, then what do? Then we go... pull out the first digit, which is a DGT operation. Where's my reference card? It's probably not very helpful. Right, DGT just takes register or immediate and automatically pulls out the correct digit from the accumulator, putting the result in the accumulator. So we want DGT1. So now the accumulator contains a number probably, where's my thing again, colours, from 2 to 8, which represents which roughly represents which bucket we want, except that if it says 2 or 3, we ideally want to put those in the same bucket. So then we could do mov x1 to set the address pointer of the RAM. Mov 1 ac add D1. Gods, this is inefficient. Sorry, add x naught. Now we've lost. Oh gods. Problem is that I actually need to save that address so I can back up one again. Let's save it in dat x naught or dat x1 of ac x naught slip 1 jump B. Well, we seem to have the slight problem that we don't actually detect the button being released and we've already run out of code, so that's going to be a problem. But let's see if that vaguely works. That doesn't seem to be working properly, unless those are all actually meant to be the same colour. So what did I do wrong there then? It might help if we actually read the sensor, mightn't it, rather than reading the button a second time. Stoats. Right. Try that. Right, well that looks like it's maintaining some kind of a histogram at least. And we end up with the peak being in 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which should then emit Chartreuse abuse, which should be 5,5, which is indeed what we're expecting. So we've even constructed what looks like a correct histogram. Hooray! The only slight problem is that we've completely run out of program in which to evaluate the histogram, let alone do anything useful with it.
That's a small bother.
Yes. So I think this probably means I need to organise my code a bit better because it's clearly horrible at the moment. Possibly I'm kind of thinking, do I split this into yet more processors? But Because yes, of course, now the problem is that it doesn't do anything at that stage. So it just... And we have to wipe this histogram as well at the end, don't we? Ugh, messy.
Don't lick it.
Yes. This is going to require... So I wonder where we split the functionality then. Do we have one that handles the two inputs and maybe the bucketing, and then signals to the next processor which handles the histogram construction?
That kind of makes sense on the basis of transferring simple information between two reasonably well.
Yeah.
Separated jobs.
So then... So that one would then just... I mean, this one might end up being able to be a cheap processor. So this one would then do that, and it should probably thus also do the bucketing of the merging of buckets together. So something like... Because that's actually quite cheap. We can go, if we received a 2 and 1, there we are. That's that bucket merging done. And then possibly we could usefully also subtract 3 so that it ends up in the range 0 to something rather than... So then this now needs to go no, hang on. This one's meant to do it every. That's not. This shouldn't be. This should just mov ac x2. So then its target then will essentially be doing an SLX on that XBus connection. So we do need to signal in some way. You have now got everything you need. Please go and evaluate this, which might be best done by sending some Sentinel value to the down the XBus. So if we did something like that, then we could have a second processor that just, I mean, let's do this very simply. Let's have this one do, so it waits for a signal on X2. Sorry, X1. Not X0, X3. Except, of course, we need something in here that goes... And at that point something happens, namely that's the point at which we signal the next processor in the sequence to evaluate the histogram, and so yes, and then the next one, yes, then something will then have to evaluate this histogram, and we're ending up with far too many processors, and I'm sure it can be done more cheaply. But let's see what this does then. Does this manage to accumulate a reasonable histogram at least? Apart from some slight confusion, yes. What is its slight confusion then? Why do things keep happening right up at the top end of this? Let's work out what's going on here. So, as is right and proper, nothing happens at the beginning because no one has pressed the button. So that works correctly. Time advances. We TGT'd P150, and then since it, oh, have I got this arse backwards? I have. Right, that's the problem. That should be plus. If the button is still pressed, continue with the button pressed loop. Right. Right, so that appears to accumulate histograms perfectly well. So then one possible approach now is that we signal another processor whose job it is to evaluate the histogram, taking advantage of the fact that the RAM is dual ported. And then that one, and then someone's job is to clear the RAM, but we can work out whose job that is when we... And actually clearing the RAM's fairly simple. In particular, we can use the fact that we can read addresses from it to do our loop counting. So actually, maybe we should let's just write in here the code to wipe the RAM, just to see if we can do it in this amount of space. So that would go something like mov naught A0 mov, not A0, X3. Clearly this needs a way of naming your pins. Mov 0 X2 teak X3 naught minus jump E. Right, so that should then wipe the RAM and at the right moment. Let's see what that does then. No, it doesn't seem to. That sends the -1. Oh, you idiot. Compare the correct register. Right, let's try that instead. Nice one, we end up in a tight loop because that loop should actually go back to there. Right, now we appear to correctly construct and then destroy the histogram in each cycle. Oh, we don't have any spare instructions for signalling to the next processor that it's time to do some work. That's slightly embarrassing. This probably means I just need to change some... there's actually no conditional... We don't ever change the condition codes in this sequence here. So that jump E can be removed and replaced with sticking a minus condition code on the entire contents of the loop.
Just jump E to the left.
Right, so that should do the same thing. As it does, but with one spare instruction. Good. So then we could have... I may need to adjust this a bit if I want to be able to get those... what I actually now want is something that signals to the third processor that the RAM contains a valid histogram, and we want it to be evaluated. So that probably means we want an X-bus output from the second processor. I want two instructions. Maybe not. An X-bus output from the second processor that signals to the third processor, I think. Which means we need to wire up X0, which is currently colliding with that pin there. Which we can deal with by reorganising things to be slightly more sensibly laid out. Actually, if we put that all the way down there, then we replace X1 with X0 throughout. And that can be stuck in there. And we can do something like that, which means we've still got some space. So then that should obviously wait for sorry, quickly glancing at IRC and concluding that most of it is not actually relevant. Right, so then we wait for X0, which will be the signal to say things are ready. Then let's assume that we start with A1 pointing in the right place. Then we can just repeatedly... That means we may not even need to touch... Oh, we probably use that as our loop counter, don't we? Then we go... This is going to be irritatingly complicated because we will actually want to step... Oh, no, of course, yes, I can see a way to do this. We loop twice. First time we just go through finding the magnitude of the mode. On the second pass through we find it. And that saves us having to carefully record what the largest is and where we found it. And in particular, that means that we that we can directly do comparisons from the XBus port. I think that works. So we do something like TGT X3 ACK if it is MOV. Hang on, that doesn't work, does it? Sorry, we've got DAT available now. MOV. Oh, we first of all have to read from the XBus in order not to seize it. Oh, no, there's a sneakier approach to this. We don't read from the XBus port. We read from the XBus port to signal that we finished dealing with the RAM. That way, I was wondering how I was going to signal back, but of course, reading sends back a signal of I have read your data. So we don't read from the XBus port. The XBus being ready for us to read tells us that we can do things, and reading the XBus says we have consumed all the data from the RAM. Clever. Oh, incidentally, let's wire that up to X1 because I'm going to need X0 for something else. There we go. Right. So what we do then is we read X3 into DAT. If that's greater than ACK, then MOV ACK. MOV DAT ACK. So there essentially we accumulate in the accumulator test if we have gone all the way through the RAM. If not, read the next one. So that loop finds us the highest, the largest count in the histogram. Thank you. And if we stick in a MOV null X1, that will then signal that that will signal to that processor that it's time to read things. Obviously, this processor hasn't finished its work, so it doesn't yet wipe the. Actually, then it can do MOV X1 null in order to say I'm now ready for you to wipe the RAM. So then we can test that.
Good you to people, maybe see some of you tomorrow at 2.
Rather bizarrely, apparently that counts as connecting the pin, putting a small bit of copper on it. Right, so accumulating information in the histogram works. That then signals that, which signals that, which then concludes that the highest value anywhere in the histogram is 6, continues reading throughout the entire histogram memory, stops at the end, signals back, and that processor then wipes the histogram memory. Excellent, right, that works. So now we just need to insert into here the second part, which is to run through the histogram memory again, and this time remember what the address was when we where we found whatever value we have in ACK. So we then go something like teak x3 ACK if it is mov x2 x0 yes, I know. There we go. Then check whether x2 is 0. If it is not, jump to the second loop. There we go. Right. So I think that now should signal out of this port where in the RAM the highest value was found. So histogram accumulation, and the whole thing should crash, having fed 3. Oh yes, because of course we read the address after we've advanced the pointer. We actually send one more than the number we were interested in. Oh well, it's probably close enough. Right. So we're probably going to need another big one, because we're going to need address and data connections to the ROM. That's going to need to be 1 square further to the right. Can't quite stick that there because it falls off the board. Let's adjust the routing of this track a bit and see if we can. Oh no, but we need both of the. That's fine. So if we move, we can now move that down 1. Plug that in there. That in there. Right. So this one is actually quite simple, and we're only using such a big processor because we need 2 simple outputs and 3 XBus ports. Well, I think it's simple. see, we generally output K followed by N. So we want to move it to P1 followed by P0. And then, so that's the bucketing. So the first two are, oh yes, and this needs to start with initialize it to boring grey. So those two entries won't be used. The next two entries should be dot blood 95.5. The next two entries should be deep nacho 55. The next two entries should be chartreuse abuse 55. The next entry should be ballistic viridian 560. Next entry should be cool dad 1580. Final entry should be high purple 7585. Right. Might work. Let's hit the simulate button and see what happens. Well, that looks pretty good. Victory! We have some rather pricey colour coordinating shoes.
I think for this sort of thing, probably the opportunity to charge the earth is not particularly a misfeature.
It occurs to me I haven't stuck a note for the other two things since I was carefully documenting what each component on board did. There we are. Some additional notes which cost nothing. Right. So yes, maybe. Like that last processor seems rather overkill. But it takes like 3 instructions to do a looped count through the RAM to avoid needing an address connection to it. Through the ROM, rather. Which is going to be a pain. And we need 2 simple outputs, so we can't use a M4000X. Sorry, MC4000X. And all the others, well, they certainly at present have enough. I mean, they all, this one, these two don't have any simple connections, so it's only the code size that means I can't make them out of MC4000Xs. I mean, we don't actually need to do that by that route, do we? We could have it just reset. But that's the same. I mean, we could have it reset the address counter on the RAM rather than waiting for it to wrap round. Because as soon as it's found the correct number, it knows it doesn't need to go any further. But that doesn't help us much because that's one instruction either way. We either have to test for x2 being 0, or we have to, having done conditionalise the jump on that previous test and then mov 0 x2. Like, we essentially, we're either testing if it's 0 or we're making it 0, and either of those burns one instruction. Because we don't otherwise do that. Actually, yes, because we do at some point need to reset our address pointer. I think. Do we? Yes, because we need at some point to at least decide where we're starting the loop, and that probably means resetting the address pointer, because it otherwise means reading the address pointer. Either of those, one instruction. And I need to clear quite a lot of instructions out of that processor to make it smaller. There's some way I can make them into a single loop. Like, not really. So that's necessary, I think, yes. And we kind of have to do that bit. Either that or we, like, yeah, that's not going to work. Step back and try it again, but that's going to take longer. I'm staring at this bit at the moment. We kind of have to have a loop end test. And then we go back to the start. And that one is just read if we found the best one, jump out. And do the thing. If we've reached the end, jump out, and otherwise do something slightly different. So yeah, don't see. I can't see an immediate way to make this vastly simpler. And like this one is. That looks like an awful lot of code for what it does. Can we make this one simpler? Because all it does is the bucketing. So is there a way that it can do that with slightly less faff? Like, because it's got these two tests. Like, it's currently got two loops because it wants to edge detect the button falling, the button going low, which it does by like seeing whether it's in the second loop. So maybe it could better be done as a single loop that each time around checks the button and has some way of remembering whether last time around whether we need to send an end of a button up signal. I don't think we want it to send a button up signal whenever the button is up, because then the histogram evaluator is going to get confused. Like, we've got two slip ones, two sets of jumps, two TGTs. I feel surely we can do a better job than that. Though whether we can do enough better is another matter. Actually, I feel what I should do is grab another processor and start scribbling the code to be different. So then, can we just conditionalize the whole thing? So the things we want to do each loop are that test and a sleep, and then jump to the top, which ideally we do just by falling off the bottom.
I was going to say, your test jumping near the bottom of that processor looks very like the one at the top.
It does, doesn't it? Yes, like exactly the same as the one at the top. So we can replace that with a jump T. Except there's that mod minus 1x2 at the bottom, which is the edge detection, which is the slightly twiddly thing. So then if the button is held down, then we do the bucketing. There is, of course, the slight problem that we do have a test inside the bucketing routine. So then the bit we critically have to do, and I don't think we can simplify this much, is these 4 instructions. And I suppose that one as well. So then that does only leave us one instruction for button up processing. Which could fit in here. I mean, the extreme version of it is just, but then we have the problem that then we need to, in the next one, detect repeated minus ones and ignore them. Oh, no, that doesn't help. The ACK gets corrupted each time around. So we can't just... I was wondering if we can't store something in ACK to be our state of where in the loop are we. I kind of want to... no, that's not going to work. It feels like we should be able to squeeze this into fewer instructions, but having some difficulty coming up with it. So that bit, I think, is all. I've actually removed the sub from this, which we kind of need in order to fit things into the ROM at the end. Okay, maybe I can't fit this into a small processor.
Can you get back to the working version now?
I put the test version in a new processor, so it should still work fine. For I am cautious. Right, so that seems to have been successful. Sun Haotian has a new project for us. He's calling it the Safety Net Tracking Badge. Looking at the specs, it seems to have multiple functions, including reporting the location of the wearer around multiple sectors. There is a map included. sector map.
And providing one-way communication. Computer.
There's a map included. I don't think I can overstate how important this work is. Not only are my contacts hinting that they want hundreds of thousands of these, they want them very fast. Evidently they're about to take the wraps off their big and quite sinister project very soon.
I mean, complicated tracking badges you wear all around your office? I mean, you actually know about that.
Yes, I've got one of those. It doesn't work anymore because I wore it outside in the rain. Radar sync is a simple input indicating the current heading of the central tracking radar. Radar ping is a simple input indicating the current distance from the central tracking radar if it is currently pointing in the user's direction. Radio RX is a non-blocking X-bus input connected to a receiver. Radio TX is an X-bus input connected to a transmitter. Speaker is a simple output connected to a miniature self-amplified audio speaker. When a data packet is received and begins with a value of 1, the subsequent data should be treated as length prefixed audio data and played over the speaker. When a data packet is received that begins with a value of 2 and specifies the ID of the badge should respond with its current sector. The user's location can be determined when a radar ping pulse is detected by correlating the current heading and distance from the central tracking radar with the sector map. So the sector map says if sync is 0, then we always return... No, if ping is... That says if ping is greater than or equal to 80. Not sure I believe that. We always return 100. And then there are a bunch of different sectors, some of which, if ping is less than equal to 50, we always return 700. Unless sync is 0, in which case we return 600. And if ping is between 80 and 50, we return something 200, 201, 202, 203 or 204, depending on the value of sync. Right. Well, this is going to be a complicated one. Oh, they give us a map for assistance. Maybe we should try something a bit simpler first. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So conveniently, the message we have to play is just the right size to fit in RAM, in one of our standard RAM chips. So, I mean, so I think we obviously have an audio playback processor because that's kind of necessary. So, like, there'll be an MC4000 which is wired up to the speaker and which is wired up to the RAM, and which gets signalled somehow when we have to play something back, and at that point plays it back. And like, it only actually needs to be connected to the how many things? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Conveniently, 13 means we can have a terminating value rather than having to actually pay attention to the byte count, which conveniently then means we only need to use one XBus port on this processor to connect to the RAM, and then we can use the other one for the "you should make a noise now" signal. And similarly, actually, bet we can't do this in little enough space, but oh, hang on. No, that one needs at least 3 XBus ports if it's going to work like that, which is probably what we need anyway, because we'll need something quite big reading the radio. So let's write some terrible code. I'm just trying to do the audio processing for now. And then I might decide this is just too scary to do the rest. How do we know when we've reached the end of the packet? Does it return minus 999 again then? So this obviously lacks anything for... Okay, it might help if I read from the correct XBus port. Is this one of those irritating, we actually have to output 50 all the time if we're producing silence? How irritating. So that then writes the packet into the RAM. Right, and then we should get a minus 999 at the end of the packet, which would be fine, except that now it's just going to sit there wiping the entire RAM with minus 999, which is not really helpful. So now this will write the packet and then stop. After terminating it with -999. Of course, it never actually outputs anything because now we haven't yet written the output processor. So what that should actually do now is go more. Then when we run it, it goes, having just filled up that, and nothing happens. Right, good. So then this processor does...
I guess what the inputs are, but those top two graphs at the bottom look like somebody walking up some stairs, tripping over rubber and falling out there. Repeatedly.
Yes.
The kind of staircase that you can push a block off the top so that it falls right down to the bottom, and that's irreversible, so it must be the right thing to do. You can jump if you like with a bandicoot. Ooh.
That's nice.
You might crash. It's true.
How does that work? Because it needs to actually...
Oh, right, yes.
Well, that's utter rubbish. Oh, sorry, I missed part of the specification. The message, when you get a message, it consists of length prefixed audio data. Whereas I was just reading to the end of the packet. Do you think we can assume that it runs to the end of the packet?
And then, well, you never seem to get the bottom of the packet.
Or do I actually have to pay attention to this silly length byte? Solve that. Right, there we go, that more or less works.
Hmm? It's very even. Too busy trying not to get killed by strange creatures. There are various things that that's what you should play next single player it off. I did it. I've done it. What? Have you? Yes. Yeah, I did do it. Did you get all the things? Remember? Because that's hard. All the goodies and also all the registered that took me a while.
Why did that not reset to 50 then? Oh, because that jumps to T, which is not the, which is no longer in the correct position, right? Yes. Right, well, that's the audio part working correctly. I mean, gratuitously breaking the spec in that it ignores the length byte in the packet and just assumes that the string will end at the end of the packet.
Well, cheap electronics. What do you expect?
Yes. Like if you're not actually going, if you're not going to include in your test something that appends garbage to the packet to make sure I don't read it.
Are you subverting this corporation's attempt to track their employees by ensuring they can poon the badges?
I don't think it's a serious security flaw. Well, it might be actually. This means you can more easily crash the badge.
Yes, I mean,
If you send it. Well, actually, the danger is if you send
if
it.
the badge is doing something that the employee doesn't want, then they don't need to do anything subtle to it. A
Yes.
sledgehammer is an adequate hack.
Um,
You can't hack with a sledgehammer because it hasn't got a metal edge. That is a good point. Oh well. Yes. Good night.
so our slight problem now is that this first processor has no spare X-bus ports. So while we've done the audio processing bit beautifully, we don't have anywhere to wire in this ID chip. And it really has to be wired to a real X-bus port somewhere. On the other hand, this processor also doesn't transmit anything. So maybe we have at least one separate processor whose job it is to handle the radar, and that is the thing that's wired to the radio transmit. So we can disconnect that anyway. And then we could use that X1 to talk to the other processor that then has ports wired up to this and radar sync and radar ping. Obviously that's not going to work in a spatial thing, is it? Probably need to tuck this processor further out of the way. Because we're going to want. Well, let's first get some of this written and then see what happens. So this needs to remember where we are each cycle. So possible that we need another little processor whose job is just keeping track of our current location, but maybe we can fit that into one. Because this needs to repeatedly do something like so then that now updates AC and DAT with the current location of the with the current location of our device, which is nice and simple. problem is we then need to convert that into a zone number, sector number, which is an infuriating map. As it says, so sync is a fairly uninteresting set of numbers. So sync comes out as 0, 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, which is slightly interesting in that they're all multiples of 20, which would mean that if we had a ROM, it could advance by 2 for each of those, and they would all fit. But the thing is, we then need 3 values at each location, unless we can do... Suppose we could have the fact that 100 is used whenever ping is greater than 80. So that could just be a comparison. Ooh. Maybe we have a little processor that simply walks through the ROM as radar sync. We probably need to actually look at radar sync, because we want this to be able to start up without radar sync always having to be 0 at startup. I mean, maybe it's always 0 at startup, but that seems, relying on our device having a clock perfectly synchronized to the radar transmitter might be a bit optimistic. I'm just having a very silly thought here, which only works if we aren't queried too often for our position, which is that we have one processor that reads from the radar and updates the address pointer in a ROM to match what we've just heard from the radar, and then another processor just reads from the data port of the ROM whenever it needs to know where we're currently pointed to. And obviously that only works if we don't get asked for our position more than once per radar sweep. Which seems a bit dodgy. So I'm kind of thinking about how this integrates with the rest of the system, and it's a bit awkward because we've got no simple I/O ports left for use to allow us to interrupt this processor and have it tell us where we are at any given moment. So it might be nice if there was some external thing that it essentially wrote our current location to. And like one approach is simply to have it write it out to RAM, but that's an entire RAM chip to hold 2 numbers. I suppose if this one's going to be this big, we could have it do the reading from the ROM. And then output the number somehow to somewhere. This is feeling all rather complicated. And it's like 10 to midnight. Let's just leave this one for now. At least have a look at other things. So this one's really simple, in a sense. I mean, blatantly it has a DX300 wired to those outputs. Like, how else would you build this? And then the tricky thing is that the longest that we have to work in half-ounce units up to 3 ounces, which means that some cocktails require 6 6-digit outputs, which, if we were to do this the really naive way of just recording the outputs for every pin for every time step, means in the ROM means we need 12 ROM entries per cocktail, which means we need 1 ROM chip per cocktail, which is just going to be a nightmare. So we obviously can't do that. But what we really want is to have counters of how many. So what does of how many of each thing we have in each cocktail. So what happens? I'm sure we've asked this question before. So let's write a trivial thing. Right, so sending any number greater than 0. Right. Sending any number greater than 0 to any of these pins causes it to become high, 100. So what that means is that we can represent a cocktail as the number of each ingredient, and we output, and we can subtract 111 repeatedly in order to gradually emit the total amount of material we need. We have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, what a surprise, cocktails, which means we can fit them all into one ROM. Slightly optimistically, I wonder if we can do this in an MC4000X. No, we can't, because we don't have enough X-bus ports. So we need 2 to drive them, 2 to drive the ROM, and 1 to read the keypad. Which is obviously not enough. So let us fake this by doing this. Let's wire that up there, stick in another MC4000X, which listens to the keypad, which sets up the address port on the ROM and then signals please generate a cocktail. Right, so all that this does is mov, let's make it x0, it's clearly silly to wire it up to x1, x0 ac mol2 mov ac x3, we want an SLX x0 at the top, don't we? Mov ac x3 mov null x2, that's it. So that processor's job is just read the blah blah, yeah. Right. This one's job is to wait until x1 is ready. Then, oh no, we're going to need 2 accumulators, aren't we? Because we need one that's driving each of those outputs. And we don't have a swap operation. Do we actually want one processor driving each of these? Got enough ports to do that, haven't we? Because otherwise we haven't got enough space to have 2 accumulators. Okay, sod it, we're going to use 2 MC4000Xs on the output side. Yes, I just randomly deleted one and then recreated it, sorry. So, what was my plan? I had a plan. So it actually involves going, each of these just waits for an input, that's not quite right, is it? We want to go because we actually want the loop, we want to write it out to x2 even if it's at 0, so actually that bit wants to go up there, kind of. It doesn't really matter where. And then the idea is... Oh no, but we've only got... We've got 2 X-Bus ports on this though, haven't we? The problem is now this one needs more X-Bus ports than it's got, again. Because we need 2 to connect up the ROM plus 1 to connect up to each of these processors. Unless I can come up with a stupid arrangement whereby we don't need that. Which I think is probably something trivial like these actually daisy chain. So this one just goes mov x0 x1 at the top, and then we make kind of that connection. So then that does mov ac x3, and then rather than mov null x2, it does mov x2 x0 mov x2 x0. So it sends 2 bytes over to there. That then sends 1 byte on to that processor, and then those actually do the production work. And like, it's fairly trivial because they're not actually emitting anything yet. But other than that, it appears to more or less function. So now let's just put some numbers in. Oh, it actually asks for 4 first, right. Should reset these to 0. So it asks for 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's just put in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then see what we emit when that happens. Well, that's some spectacularly confusing behaviour. Excellent. So shockingly, we emitted the correct amount of vodka there. So 4 should emit a Cape Cod, which should have 2 ounces of vodka. So 4 in there is the vodka quantity. Many of the others we appear to have got horrifically confused, so I'm a bit worried that something is going badly wrong in the output. Maybe we should not trust this yet. So at that point we have started emitting things, and we have correctly put 1, 2, 3 in there and 4, 5, 6 in there. So lime, cranberry, vermouth are the first 3 bytes. There's a note. And 4, 5, 6 are but we don't actually know which way round they are yet, so let's just test things a bit more carefully. So that correctly initializes them to that, and then that subtracts 1 and correctly turns off lime. So those do indeed go in the order lime. Right, then it goes to minus 99. That's a bit of a problem, isn't it? That's part of why it goes wrong. So yes, my clever, well, let's just subtract 1, 1, 1, and then see when it hits 0 would work fine were it not for the fact that it will often become negative, because we don't saturate at 0. And we certainly don't saturate at 0 like that. So how do we do that then? Like yes. It was all very clever until we hit 0. And suddenly everything starts borrowing and unhappiness ensues. So what we really want is subtract 1 from each digit, unless that digit is 0, in which case leave it at 0. Maybe I should snooze too.
I'm very sleepy. I just was wandering 2 and off wandering 10, so I should probably stop now.
So yes, my nice output processors don't actually work properly at all. So the question is there some cunning way I can make those output processors work properly? For extra points, can we arrange that the output that this involves using our programmable logic device? So many bits. It does have 3 inputs and 3 outputs, doesn't it? Yes. Feels to me like there ought to be a way to do this. Maybe also feels to me like I'm too snoozed to work it out. Like, I feel that there must be some clever way if we can't do it precisely in this way, maybe there's something else we can write in the ROM that can be used to tell us what to emit. I'm wondering if it's worth just writing all the... There is, of course, also the fact that we have to really ought to subtract 1 from the input. Because the numbers that come in are 1 to 7 rather than 0 to 6. So yes, that still works properly, except that those obviously seize up horribly at that moment. The thing is, the programmable logic devices aren't very stateful. Obviously, if we had one CPU per output, that would make life easy. But that's an awful lot of processors. Because then they could just each have a little counter that counts down. I mean, I suppose the extreme thing would be to have one processor that reads the recipe from ROM and then spits out into RAM, into 2 RAM chips, one for each output processor, what they should output for every time tick. But that's actually just moving the problem somewhere else, isn't it? Then we have that thing that has to... Yeah, all I've done there is inserted a miracle in the middle of the system, which does what I currently want the output processor to do. There. Right, yes, well, okay, I'm going to leave these 2 projects half finished. We'll come back to them on Sunday when I might be more awake. I mean, one of them, to be fair, does half of what it's supposed to do correctly, which this one really doesn't. I mean, this one correctly reads the recipes out of the ROM. It just doesn't do anything good with them. Let's type the recipes in. Are they in order? Vodka shot, lemon drop, cosmopolitan, Cape Cod, vodka martini, gimlet, gin martini. Right, yeah. The vodka shot is 3 of vodka. So it is 0, 300. Lemon drop is 6 vodka, 6 vodka, 2 lemon. So that's 0, 602. Cosmopolitan is 2 vodka, 1 lime, 1 cranberry. 4 vodka, 2 lime, 2 cranberry rather. So 4 vodka, 2 lime, 2 cranberry. Cape Cod is 4 vodka, 4 cranberry. Vodka martini is 6 vodka, 1 vermouth. One vermouth. 6 vodka, 2 vermouth. Gimlet is 6 gin, 2 lime. And the gin martini is 6 gin, 2 vermouth. So that at least would be what the ROM should contain, were it not for the fact that the entire idea is not going to work with those output processors like that. But that's at least got the naive contents of the ROM. And then we just need to work out either a way that we can process that into something, into the actual correct output signals, or a different way of encoding the contents of the ROM. Right, that will do for now. It doesn't work, but... So yes, back on Sunday when we actually try to solve the problems. I mean, we solved one of them. But meanwhile, good night.